Nancy Pelosi goes mental on Wolf Blitzer. Social media giants Twitter and Facebook try to silence a story that makes Joe Biden look bad. The Amy Coney Barrett hearings go extremely well for Amy Coney Barrett and extremely poorly for Democrats. Joe Biden has a play date with George Stephanopoulos, and Donald Trump gets beat the hell up on live TV. Welcome to the podcast. This podcast streams weekly on Sundays at 2 o'clock. If you like the content, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can always unsubscribe later. Also, feel free to leave a like, and if you really have an idea, leave a comment in the comment section below. I try and read all the comments right now, so I'll try and get back to you if I can. So the first big piece of news for this week, in my opinion, comes courtesy of CNN of all places. So, some people may have heard about this, but Nancy Pelosi went on Wolf Blitzer's show and did an interview, which I thought Wolf Blitzer actually did pretty well. He actually went and asked Nancy Pelosi hard questions, which is something I don't think we've seen a lot of from the left in this election. Normally you would expect him to ask her questions on just like, oh, how is the deal going? However, he actually asked her some hard questions like, why not just accept the deal? Which has been the question that every Republican has had on their mind since August. Why not just accept a temporary deal and play the politics while people aren't going hungry? So Wolf Blitzer asks her this, and Nancy Pelosi goes absolutely mental here. She just basically starts berating him. She calls him a Republican operative, which I don't think anyone who watches Wolf Blitzer's show would normally go and agree with. I mean, he may not be as far to the left as someone like Don Lemon or Andrew Cuomo, who just outright ignore failures on the left. But I mean, calling him a Republican operative or an apologist for the right, like, really? Wolf Blitzer, an apologist for the right. Anyway, here's Nancy Pelosi just absolutely going off on Wolf Blitzer for no apparent reason.
They really need the money right now, and even members of
I
your own.
understand that, but
but even members of your own caucus, even members of your own caucus, Madam Speaker, want to accept this deal. $1.8 trillion. Congressman Ro Khanna, for example. But let me just quote Ro Khanna, a man you know well. I assume you admire him. He's a Democrat. And he just said this. He said, people in need can't wait until February. $1.8 trillion is significant and more than twice the Obama stimulus. Make a deal. Put the ball in McConnell court. So what do you say to Ro Khanna?
What I say to you is, I don't know why you're always an apologist, and many of your colleagues apologists for the Republican position. So you're the apologist for the Obama, excuse me, God forbid.
Madam Speaker, I'm not an apologist.
Obama.
I'm asking you serious questions because so many people are in desperate need right now. Let me ask you this. The president only wants his name on a check to go out before Election Day and for the market to go up. Is that what this is all about? Not allow the president to take credit if there's a deal that will help millions of Americans right now?
He's not that important. But let me say this. With all due respect, and you know we've known each other a long time, you really don't know what you're talking about. Cheers.
And it's not about me. It's about millions of Americans who can't put food on the table, who can't pay the rent,
and we represent them. And we represent them.
Getting by.
And we represent
these
them.
long food lines that we're seeing. I know you are.
We know them.
I'm just saying.
We represent them and we know them.
As we say.
We know them. We represent them.
Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, as they say here in Washington.
It is nowhere near perfect.
Madam Speaker.
Always the case, but we're not even close to the good.
All right, let's see what happens, because every day is critically, critically important. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for your sensitivity to our constituents' needs.
I am sensitive to them because I see them on the street begging for food, begging for money. Madam Speaker, thank you so much.
Have you fed them? We feed them. We feed them.
For a little background context on what you just saw there, basically Andrew Yang and a few other Democrats had come out and said, just take the deal now, play the politics. As I said, that's sort of the question a lot of Republicans have been asking since August. Like, why not just take the deal and we can work on all of the stuff that we're not sure about later. So a few Democrats came out, and Wolf Blitzer asks her about this, as he should. Like, that's his job. He should ask her about this, and he does. He does a good job about it, too. And she goes off. And I love the part at the end here where she's like, we feed people. Yes, Congress feeds people. No, not the jobs that are shut down because of COVID. Congress. Congress is what puts food in your stomach, not the farmers, not the distribution plants, not the stores. It's Congress who does it. So, and that's not even the worst part about this story. I think the worst part about this story is, one, how little coverage it gets on like the major networks. Because aside from Fox News, I mean, CNN didn't have any follow-up to this. Not that that's really expected, but like MSNBC didn't say anything about this. And really egregiously on The View. I mean, let's be fair, The View is about as far left as you get from mainstream television. So on The View, they, like the celebrities in Hollywood have absolutely no idea what it's like for the average American, the average student, anyone out there. They're in this bubble where they think that everything should happen their way and that they just don't understand what's going on. So on The View, one of the worst programs out there, I'm not sure how it's still on the air, they yell at Wolf Blitzer for this. Because yes, Wolf Blitzer is a terrible apologist for the right. He was so far out of line for asking Nancy Pelosi a hard question.
And Wolf, I love Wolf. Who doesn't love Wolf? We all love Wolf, but he was out of line. He doesn't know what's going on behind closed doors. He's not in on the deal.
So this is absolutely absurd here. I mean, all the parties should be asked hard questions. The Democrats should be asked hard questions. The Republicans should be asked hard questions. It shouldn't be this one-sided debacle where we treat the Democrats with these kid gloves and we treat the Republicans with iron mallets and fists. Like, you can't have it just one way. But that's the way they want it to be, because they want this election to just be about Trump's personality. So they don't go and ask the hard questions. Joe Biden doesn't get asked the hard questions about the courts. And when he does, they're content with him simply not answering. We'll come back to that later because it does come up again, sadly. This will be the third week that I have to cover the fact that Joe Biden does not answer questions on court packing. But where's the surprise anymore? This is 2020. But, it's a real shame for the media that people yell at them for not treating the Democrats with kid gloves, but then if they go and they treat the Republicans the same with those kid gloves that they want them to treat the Democrats with, it's egregious. If Donald Trump doesn't get asked a hard question, or if he gets a softball question, it's the worst thing ever. Why weren't you asking him harder questions? But if Joe Biden gets asked by some supporter in the crowd, oh, well, can't you tell us just how much you love us? And what kind of a question is that? Now, this week, Joe Biden did actually get asked some hard questions, but again, I'll come to that later at the end of the show. So, as I said, here's Nancy Pelosi getting asked a hard question and absolutely falling apart over it. Because she doesn't have a good answer. The truth is that the Democrats don't want a deal, because when you don't make a deal, it always reflects worse on the party in power. And that's just the fact of it. When Barack Obama was the president and we had a government shutdown, or any time there's ever been a government shutdown, it has always reflected worse on the party that controls the presidency, or especially when the party controls the presidency and the Senate. Because in the end, they have the power in theory to make the deal, but they won't. So the Democrats are holding up the stimulus spending to hurt Republicans. And the truth is that really, as this gets closer to the election, it's going to backfire on Democrats. Because what's this extra spending that Nancy Pelosi is saying is going to help the average American? It's bailouts for LA. It's bailouts for New York. There are bailouts for cities for the rioting damage that they have allowed to occur. in these bills. There are bailouts for the massive spending of police pensions and overall government pensions for these cities that these cities chose to take out, when in reality, the government should not bail these cities out under any situation. They dug the hole, they need to lie in it. So I know I just said that the number one story should have been the entire deal with Nancy Pelosi. And you know what? I just realized I'm completely wrong, actually. The number one story should be that about how Twitter and Facebook reduced or just outright blocked the distribution of a New York Post story this week about Hunter Biden. So the story as it has unfolded so far is Hunter Biden or someone, we don't really know who, took his computer to a computer repair store. Somehow it ended up in the hands of the FBI after whoever dropped it off didn't pick it up again. And through some series, it was leaked out, a bunch of emails which showed Hunter Biden what appears to be Hunter Biden basically promising people to give them access to Joe Biden. This included emails to one of the people from Burisma, remember the whole company where Joe Biden got a prosecutor fired who was supposedly going to investigate Burisma. Well, there's an email from that showing that Hunter Biden may have tried to offer access. And the Joe Biden campaign came out and said, no, this didn't happen. Then they said, well, if it was a short meeting, it could have happened. Basically, there's no evidence that this hasn't happened. However, what's absolutely, completely unacceptable here is how Twitter and Facebook handled it. So Facebook decided to limit the distribution of the story while outside fact checkers reviewed the claims. Now, this makes no sense. Facebook does not regularly do this. They said that it's regularly something they do, but no, like, one, how would they know that it was possibly false? Two, who gave them the tip off? I'm willing to put some money down somewhere. I'm not going to give an amount, but I'd put money down right now that someone from the Biden campaign called up Facebook and Twitter and said, hey, this is completely false. And, you should really take it off your website. So that's what I think is going on here, because there's no reason for this to have been taken down the way it was. Twitter said that its policy was because it had rules against sharing content obtained through hacking that contains private information. First off, there is no evidence that this information was obtained through hacking. Second, this policy has not been applied equally, and that'll come back in just a minute as I explain this. So I just want to ask quickly, is there another story or two out there where this policy should have applied but didn't? Maybe some New York Times story about, I don't know, Donald Trump's tax returns where we don't know how they were obtained, or no, that would actually fall entirely under the way they've applied this policy, but they don't. And as someone like I am a staunch defender of free speech, but the social media companies do not make it easy to defend their right to curate content so long as this is the way they do it. Now, I am the last person who wants a war over getting the government to decide what you are and aren't allowed to do as a company. I think that you should be able to do whatever you want, personally. But when you act like a publisher and not like a platform, and that's how these companies are protected. They act like platforms and not publishers. But when they start curating their content and editing the message boards to fit what they want to distribute, they become publishers. And that gives the government grounds under current laws to take away their right to do that, to do things like this. It means the government gets involved, and that's not something we want. So I don't know why these companies are basically taking the gun and shooting themselves in the foot over this stuff. Not, again, there's no evidence that this story is even remotely false. Nobody has come out and confirmed that it's false. All of the evidence right now points to this story being at least likely true. Now, is it possible that Joe Biden never talked to anyone? Absolutely. But there is a problem out there that his son is going around and promising access to the person who is going to be the future president of the United States. That is an extremely valid point to make during this campaign. If Joe Biden's son is going around offering dictators, CEOs, or people on the board of directors of shady companies access to the president, whether they get it or not, that's corrupt. Now, it may not be illegal. In similar ways, with Donald Trump, there are things that are corrupt but not illegal. But it still doesn't make it good. So, this is really disturbing. Now, of course, Twitter later reversed its policy and said, oh, well, we're just going to start giving warnings that this stuff might not be entirely accurate, even though, again, there's no evidence that it isn't at all accurate. So Twitter then, however, is refusing to unlock the New York Post account. The New York Post is a pretty well-respected journalistic outlet. They're slightly, and I mean very slightly, right of center. They're nowhere near a Fox News, but they're also not quite a CNN, and they're definitely not an MSNBC. But they're a pretty middle-of-the-line news outlet, and Twitter's just locked their account over this story. Facebook downgraded their publishing capabilities because the story could be false. Now, this is all before the fact checkers have gone back on it, proven anything wrong. And again, that makes this a real problem that these companies are doing this. Like, you go to these outside sources sometimes for information that you don't think the mainstream outlets are necessarily going to give you. Now, of course, Twitter reversed its policy because, oh, wait a minute, that makes it hard for us to actually accept these leaks out of the Trump administration, because it does. A ton of stories have broken under the Trump administration that Twitter has not applied this policy to, and that's a real problem. So, again, this should really be, I'm pretty sure it is, and it should be a massive story. And I can only hope that these companies come around to the realization that they have better things to do than curate content in favor or against presidential candidates, and that they can really work to give people the freedom of information that people originally went to these places for. I honestly don't think that people started just going to Twitter and Facebook. And I say this sort of laxly because a lot of people do use it for entertainment and just to talk with people. But I think part of the reason that people really started going over to Facebook and Twitter is because it was part of the explosion of information with the internet, where you had access to information you didn't have before. So, the other big thing that happened this week was, of course, the Amy Coney Barrett hearings. And I thought that they went pretty well. Now, a lot of people seemed very upset for some reason that she didn't seem to give concrete answers on how she would vote or how she would deal with questions like LGBTQ rights or Obamacare or even just abortion rights. And the truth is that this is a monster of the Democrats' own making. So in my research for this episode, I learned about what was called the Ginsburg Rule. The Ginsburg Rule was instituted during the hearings of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, the sort of context for this is in previous years, the famous Bork hearings had happened where where Justice Bork went up and was called all kinds of unfounded things. I wasn't there. I can't really talk a lot about it, obviously, but most, if not all of it, was false. And Democrats were very afraid that this was going to come back and bite them, and that Republicans were going to do the same thing to Justice Ginsburg, asking her about how she would rule on things and what she thought about things. So they implemented what was known as the Ginsburg Rule. And the rule was actually proposed by a young upstart at the time known as Joseph Biden. You may know the name. I think it may be familiar to some people. And this rule basically said that you could not ask a judicial appointee about how they would rule on a case because it would tear down the cloak of judicial nonpartisanship, so to speak. And it also said that a judicial appointee could not answer the question if it was asked. So you had Democrats asking questions about how she would rule on healthcare, on the Obamacare, or how she felt about this and that, and she refused to give many answers. Of course, this led to the rather famous moment in the questioning where one of the Democrats asked her to show them her notes, and she just holds up a blank piece of paper, and here's Amy Coney Barrett just holding up a blank piece of paper in response to stupid questions.
Most of us have multiple notebooks and notes and books and things like that in front of us. Can you hold up what you've been referring to in answering our questions? Is there anything on it?
That letterhead that says United States Senate.
That's impressive. Well, Judge...
As it probably goes without saying, that was just an absolutely beautiful performance by Amy Coney Barrett. And, of course, this led to the entire hearing led to insane outcry from the left. However, none more ironic than the liberal outcry against Dianne Feinstein, who at one point said to Amy Coney Barrett in her appellate court hearings, "The dogma lives loudly within you," in an attempt to discredit her judicial impartiality, and is saying that it is time for her to retire. So a group that has long supported Feinstein, it's an LGBTQ rights group, is basically calling for I don't even know how to say it right, but they're calling on the majority leader to take away Feinstein's position within the Senate Democrats, and are telling people not to re-elect her, basically, and asking her to step down because she said that she said nice things about the hearing. She said nice things about Lindsey Graham. Yeah, I don't understand. So the executive director of Demand Justice, Brian Fallon, said it's time for Senator Feinstein to step down from her leadership position in the Senate Judiciary Committee. If she won't, her colleagues need to intervene. What kind of insanity is this at this point? And all she said, this is the terrible thing she said. She needs to step down for this. She said, "This has been one of the best hearings I've participated in. It leaves one with a lot of hopes and a lot of questions, and even some ideas, perhaps, of good bipartisan legislation we can put together." What? This is worthy of telling a senator to step down, that she thought the hearings were well executed. I don't even understand the world anymore. I keep saying this. I don't understand this world anymore. It doesn't make any sense. So a spokesperson for Feinstein went to the Washington Post and said, Judiciary Democrats had one goal this week: to show what's at stake under a 6-3 conservative Supreme Court. And we did that. We showed that Judge Barrett has a long history of opposing the Affordable Care Act and Roe v. Wade, and represents the vote to overturn both. And if that's what you believe, I mean, I guess fair enough, even though realistically, based on the voting patterns of Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, it is very likely that there is enough of a majority to overturn Roe v. Wade, or even Obergefell versus the United States. What was it? Obergefell versus, I believe Obergefell versus the United States. But, I mean, maybe the Affordable Care Act, but the case in there is really on a technicality, and it's unlikely to do anything. It's really probably not going to go anywhere. And the truth is that if Amy Coney Barrett is an originalist and she looks at this case, I don't think it's likely she's going to go, oh, well, you know what? I don't like the way that the court voted before, so I'm going to treat this case as if it was the first case I disagreed with. I don't think that's what's going to happen. Now, there was lots of glowing testimony out there for her. Pretty much all of the testimony against her was talking about how much she hates the Affordable Care Act. But one of her past students, who was a clerk for the Supreme Court, basically came out and talked about how much of an amazing person she is. She's a mother of 7. I mean, if you watch these hearings, I don't know how you couldn't come away looking at her as either a great person or a great judge. Now, that's just my opinion, but crazy world we live in today, where you can praise the proceedings and have your resignation called for because you thought the other side did a good job. So during these hearings, we were treated to a barrage of redefinitions, and this is, I mean, I guess the theme of this episode is really the Orwellian nightmare that we're starting to live in. And I have 2 examples just from the hearings alone. I mean, you can take the Twitter thing on its own, but I have 2 examples from the hearings that just back this up. And they're both redefinitions. Now, if you ever read 1984, like I assume everyone at some point in their life has, you have the Ministry of Truth, which will redefine the truth. It rewrites the truth as it sees fit. 2 instances of this that happened were, 1, the redefinition of court packing. Now, it used to be that court packing was advocating to add more justices to the court to swing the majority. So if I was to add 2 justices or more, like 2 or 4 justices to the court, that would be court packing, because you can reasonably assume I'm going to sway the court in a way that favors my side. However, that's been redefined for the Amy Coney Barrett hearings to mean just filling vacant seats. I don't know why, but for some reason, filling vacant seats now is court packing. And this redefinition did not simply stop there. The other redefinition that happened was with sexual preference. Now, I don't know. I mean, I think anyone who has been alive for more than 4 weeks would remember when sexual preference was not an offensive or homophobic term. However, it was relabeled as such during the debates. During the hearings. Not during the debates, during the hearings. And now how this happened. The Merriam-Webster English Dictionary, on the day that this happened, so the background for this, Amy Coney Barrett was asked a question on gay marriage, equal rights for LGBT people, basically, and she used the term sexual preference. And one of the senators, the Democrats, said that is an offensive term. Now, of course, she said, I didn't mean to offend anyone, as she didn't, because anyone who's been alive for more than 2 weeks probably knows that that has never been an offensive term. The same day, the Merriam-Webster English Dictionary changed the definition to mean to be from just something everyone says to being offensive. This is Orwellian stuff that is happening, redefining the words we use to change the narrative. I don't know how to explain this any other way. This is the definition of an Orwellian nightmare here, where we are living in a time and a place where terms can change just on the basis of the people in power decided it needed to change. Orwellian stuff happening. Anyway, leading into the town halls, because I've been promising to get to this topic and I really can't put it off any longer, is Joe Biden being asked about court packing. And again, he gives the most lackluster non-answer possible. He basically said, I'll come up with a position before the election. This is not an acceptable answer. And he's predicating this off of the redefining of court packing to mean filling vacant seats. Because if Trump and the Republicans, if they're packing the court by adding Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court, well, then surely they would be justified in packing the Supreme Court. Now, I've talked to people in the political science field this week, and at least this person who I talked to, I'm not going to name names because I didn't really get permission to talk about this on record or anything, but he basically said that he thinks it is very likely if the Democrats win the presidency and the Senate that they will pack the Supreme Court. They will add seats to the Supreme Court. He thinks it's very likely. He honestly said, basically, they're not going to give a straight answer. And truth be told, even if they say they won't, they probably will. This is someone who's been in the political science field for many, many years. He's got some pretty decent sway with that community. So I'm taking what he says pretty seriously here. Now, Donald Trump is way down in the polls right now. And bar another October surprise like the Hunter Biden story right now, I don't think he's going. I think it's very unlikely he wins the presidency. Now, that doesn't mean you should go and vote for Joe Biden, because voting for Joe Biden, in my opinion, is still categorically worse. Like, go vote for someone like Joe Jorgensen, who is actually a principled politician who doesn't lie about their positions and is probably a lot less controversial as a person in general. Or vote for Donald Trump, just because, in my opinion, you are better off spiting the Democrats and voting for Donald Trump at this point. I didn't want to vote for the guy. I didn't. Back in the primaries, I initially thought I might have voted for Joe Biden just because, at least I know what Obama was like. But no, Joe Biden has pushed farther than Obama at this point with policy. Then I thought, I'll vote for Joe Jorgensen. And then Joe Biden really ramped everything up, and that's why I'm voting for Trump. I mean, seriously, I can't handle this anymore. So here's Joe Biden not giving an answer again on court packing, and in fact saying he might release his position before the election, 3 days after early voting, like the day before the polls start, because early voting will have ended. I really think that's what he's aiming for here. I think he's gunning to make it so that all the people who are doing the early voting don't hear his position when they normally would have gone into the polling places as they normally would have and probably voted against him if he came out and said what he's going to say. So here's Joe Biden not giving an answer on court packing.
You've said so many times during the campaign, all through the course of your career, it's important to level with
it
the
is,
American
but George,
people.
if I say, no matter what answer I gave you, if I say it, that's the headline tomorrow. It won't be about what's going on now, the improper way they're proceeding.
But don't voters have a right to know where you stand?
They do have a right to know where I stand, and they'll have a right to know where I stand before they vote.
So you'll come out with a clear position before Election Day?
Yes, depending on how they handle this. But look, what you should do is you got to make sure you vote.
There you go. Again, this is not an answer. Now, the way that these two debates happened and were framed is night and day. That's all I can say about it. Night and day. So, on the one hand, you had Joe Biden. He got asked some tough questions. One person basically stood up and asked, you know, what do you have to say to black Americans other than you ain't black if they don't vote for you? That was a good question. And I'll actually give the media some props on asking Joe Biden hard questions for the first time in his campaign. He came out and he answered most of his questions. He reversed his stance on the tax policies, where he, if anyone remembers, in the first debate, he said he was going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. And then he said he wasn't going, and now he has said he won't repeal the Trump tax cuts, which is good news. You're possibly your taxes won't be raised. Who knows, because politicians lie all the time. I'll say that about Trump too. But on the other side was Trump basically getting beaten to death just right and left. And I mean, if you wanted a second presidential debate, I mean, the Trump town hall was perfect. There were multiple times in it where it was not a town hall, it was a debate between Trump and the moderator. And of course, one of the questions that got asked was, as always, Trump, why don't you denounce white supremacy? Now, I think if you go back 2 weeks or even 1 week on my show, you'll see he has denounced white supremacy. Maybe someday in the future, if he's still relevant by then, I'll go over the entire list of all the times Trump has denounced white supremacy. So here is the town hall moderator saying, Trump, why don't you denounce white supremacy? And Trump giving arguably the best answer he's ever given on the subject when asked in front of a massive audience.
We were supposed to, as mentioned, be watching you on a debate stage right now. We're not doing that, so let's clear up a few things from the last one. You were asked point blank to denounce white supremacy. In the moment, you didn't. You asked some follow-up questions. Who specifically? A couple of days later, on a different show, you denounced white supremacy.
No, you
My
always
question
do this.
to you is,
you've done this to me and everybody.
Why does it seem like
I denounce white supremacy? Okay,
you did
I've
2 days
denounced
later.
white supremacy for years, but you always do it. You always start off with a question. You didn't ask Joe Biden whether or not he denounces Antifa. I watched him on the same basic show with Lester Holt, and he was asking questions like Biden was a child.
Well, so this is a little bit of a dodge.
Are you listening? I denounce white supremacy.
Okay.
What's your next question?
Do you feel, it feels sometimes you're hesitant to do so, like you wait a beat.
Here we go again. Every time, in fact, my people came, I'm sure they'll ask you the white supremacy question. I denounce white supremacy.
Okay.
And frankly, you want to know something? I denounce Antifa, and I denounce these people on the left that are burning down our cities that are run by Democrats who don't know what they're doing.
While we're denouncing,
if you watch this, Trump is absolutely right about this, because frankly, he comes out, he says, I denounce white supremacy. Then the media says, well, no, you didn't, because you're not denouncing it right now. And that's literally what's happening here. She's saying, oh, well, yeah, but that was after. What do you have to say about white supremacy now? And he's like, I denounce it. And she's like, okay, but what do you have to say about it right now? And he's like, I denounce all of that. And he's right, because Joe Biden also doesn't come out and denounce Antifa. Trump has come out multiple times and denounced white supremacy. Now, of course, none of this could stop all of the celebrities. I think there was a list of 20-some celebrities who boycotted Trump's town hall, even though they were always going to probably watch Biden's town hall, because Trump is an evil, bad orange man. Yes, I'm impersonating Ben Shapiro at this point. It's okay. I do make original content from time to time. But, like, this is the theme of these things. And it's not healthy for people. It's definitely not healthy for the nation to have to sit through this stuff. I like the woman in the background who's sort of like shaking her head and nodding. She apparently got on Fox News because of that, which I think is just great. Fox News will do anything they can to gain a viewer. But so an amazing predicate to Trump's town hall, and I'll wrap it up after this, was how everyone was extremely upset that Trump would even have a town hall at the same time as Joe Biden. So for people who, again, who are older than 2 weeks, you may remember there was supposed to be a debate on Thursday. That debate didn't happen because Trump got COVID over 2 weeks before the debate. And he was declared coronavirus free a few days before the debate. He's been doing rallies for almost a week now at this point, I believe. So he was declared, it was said that he was no longer sharing COVID, but the Commission on Presidential Debate, without consulting a single medical expert, decided to just cancel the entire debate because they're totally objective and reasonable people when it comes to this stuff. No, they're not. They're really just not anymore. I mean, again, I think that the debates should just be a news network or anyone just inviting the two candidates on to explain their positions. That way the rules just sort of get set as it goes. You don't need all of this. People can make their own decisions. People are not stupid. So people were very upset that Trump would even have a debate, would even have a town hall. I thought it was actually pretty productive. And the truth is that Trump needs more of this. Trump actually needed the debate more than he needed a town hall, but I'm pretty sure he was happy to get it. And the people at NBC were extremely upset that their own network would give Trump a platform. There were editors and newscasts and all these people super upset that Trump would have a town hall at the same time as Joe Biden. Now, it turns out that Joe Biden was with George Stephanopoulos, who was a Clinton campaign staffer. So he was in pretty friendly territory. Trump, on the other hand, was just absolutely getting smacked. Like, you could see the moderator just trying to push him up into the corner, up against the rails, smack him down. And Trump was not having any of it. Now, Trump being Trump, he probably had a couple of snafus, but nothing that was too newsworthy, at least from what I could tell from everything. Well, that's all I have for this week. This podcast is self-produced. If you like the content and think that it's worth your time, please consider subscribing. Also, feel free to check out some of our other videos. Yeah, this podcast posts weekly at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Sundays. Remember to leave a like and please consider subscribing. It's free and you can always unsubscribe if you don't like the content.